She cried, raising her arms and ducking her head to avoid the fluttering creature. Her heart beat rapidly, and she had to gasp for breath. The bird flew out of the room, the kitchen, and into the dining room. She ran and closed the swinging door. She picked up the phone and punched his number, feeling even as she did it that she was making a mistake. But the phone was ringing. His secretary answered and put her on hold. He would be angry. He would reprimand her. He did not like her emotional displays. He would say, "You're 38 years old, Elizabeth. When are you going to begin to act it?" She shouldn't have called. She couldn't hang up now. He would call her back, even more perturbed at her erratic behavior. 4 months as a partner of the firm had only increased his appetite for work, his dedication, his desire to succeed. She would make an excuse to the secretary, tell her there was no need to. Then his voice, without greeting, terse as she had known it would be. "I'm in the middle of a meeting, Elizabeth," he said. "Whatever this is, can't it wait?" For an instant, panicky, she considered a lie, then gave it up. She couldn't lie to him. It wouldn't work. Bad as the truth was, that was what she had to say. "There's a bird in the house," she said. "I just got home from aerobics and—" "A bird?" he said. "I haven't got time for this, Elizabeth. Call the exterminators." "I don't want to hurt it. I just want to get it out," she said. "Tell them to trap it then," he said, not trying to conceal his irritation. "Urge them to be humane. They're the experts. I've got to go." "When will you be home?" she said, not so much because she wanted to know, but because she wanted to salvage something from the call. She felt like a child, humiliated, talking to a parent, a role she frequently played with him. It was not one she would have chosen, but at times it was the only one left. At work she managed an office of 17 people, 12 of them men, but at home she was more subservient, conciliatory. She did everything she could to keep peace. "Late," he said abruptly. "Goodbye." She hung up the phone regretfully. He could be so demanding, so sparing in his concern. It took, sometimes, a great effort on her part to bridge the gap. Then, almost like a discovery, she remembered the bird, the cause of her initial alarm. She opened the swinging door, first a crack, then wider. It took her a moment to find it. It was perched on top of a bureau that had belonged to her grandmother. It was a tiny brown bird with a yellowish-brown beak and shiny black beads for eyes. Though it remained at its perch, its head was darting in several directions, as if seeking its way to safety. Keeping low and moving slowly, after shutting the door behind her, she crept through the room, heading for the front door, careful not to startle the bird, intending to provide it with a way out. Instead, when she was in the middle of the room, the bird took flight again. The sound of its beating wings was loud in the room, and oddly terrifying. She cried out again and crouched to the floor, ducked her head under the table. The bird flew across the room and smashed into a window, bounced off, and veered wildly into the hall. She pulled the shades down on the windows and opened the door, still hoping that she could drive the bird outside to freedom, or that it would simply choose to fly that way. But the bird was not in the hall. Slowly, cautiously, almost like an intruder in her own home, she searched the house. It was not in the spare bedroom, the one she'd planned on using as a nursery when they bought the house, and it had not returned to the kitchen. It must have gone upstairs. Her heart sank. She could not open the windows upstairs to let it out. He had nailed them shut when the central air had been installed. The window unit was loud, and it kept her up at night, and it had never really cooled the room. Converting the old furnace to a new heat pump with air conditioning had been her request, granted in lieu of a trip to the Grand Cayman Islands, which had been scheduled but was canceled. And after the installation, he had nailed the windows shut, banging loudly with the hammer. "If you want a breeze," he'd said, "go stand outside." She'd heard the bird upstairs crash into another window twice. She cringed at the sound of it. Her sympathy for the plight of the poor trapped thing and her desire to have it out before he came home overcame her fear of somehow getting it tangled in her hair, and she began to climb the stairs. She could not see the bird. She went from window to window, pulling down the shades. Soon it would be dark anyway. Then she saw the bird, under a chair near one of its legs. It looked so tiny, and she could see its breast throb. The entire creature reminded her of a beating heart. It must have stunned itself by slamming into the window panes. It looked completely helpless. But when she went near the chair, the bird took flight again, startling her, zooming crazily around the room, and for the first time, twittering. She ran out and down the stairs, looking back up and panting heavily. She did not know what to do, only that she had to do something to get the bird out of the house before he came home. The air coming in the front door was cold, and she closed it. She had removed her coat in the kitchen, and now, shivering slightly, she retrieved it. Since they both worked during the day, her husband thought it was wasteful to heat the house. He kept the thermostat at 55. She wondered if the cold air would cause the furnace to come on. That would be one more thing he'd be upset about. He didn't like to use the furnace until after Thanksgiving, giving the holiday added meaning for her. Last year he had proudly held out through an unseasonable mid-November cold spell. She could remember cooking and watching television in her coat and wearing her socks to bed. He would be furious when he got home if she didn't do something about the bird. He did not like to be troubled in any way by the house. The house, as he reminded her on every occasion that it did commit to his attention, had not been his idea. She was scrupulous about taking care of it. She paid the bills, saw to it that repairs were made when they were needed, cut the grass, planted flowers, took out the garbage. The house had been her idea, the greatest concession he had made since the marriage, which had also been her idea. If he'd had his way, they would still be living together in an apartment, his apartment. The tax situation that way was better. The entire arrangement, without official declaration, was more suited to his temperament. But she had pleaded with him, almost apologetically, telling him that she was old-fashioned and that marriage was the only way she could go on living with him, even though she loved him, as if marriage was a sign of distrust, a lack of faith, rather than a pledge of it. And he had assented to her wishes, noting their impracticality, as well as their origin. He had silently suffered through the wedding, and she had been grateful for what other people had taken for an odd coldness toward the romantic occasion. Following the ceremony, it was understood that it was her job to be as good a wife as she had been a lover, and to never let the marriage bind, or the house become a nuisance.